For the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the sham. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the sham. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. It's a jam for the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the sham.
Hold it, stop the music!
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen. Can I please have your attention?
Now showtime, are you ready? Are you ready for start time?
Let's find out. Ready, let's go.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Let's Learn Ecamm Live. My name is Neil Farrimond. I am a moderator here at Ecamm, and I've got my own YouTube channel where you'll find some tutorials relating to video, audio and live production and all that kind of stuff. So for the next hour, I'm going to be walking you through some of the features and workflows in Ecamm. And for those of you that are new to the Ecamm family, welcome. You are very welcome indeed to this wonderful community, one of the best communities I've been a part of. So before we get into the demo, let's maybe take a quick look at who we have in the chat. There's a few people in the chat already. Hello, Mr. Camera Junkie, saying hello to Val. Val is here as well. And of course, the one and only Mr. Moderator is here as well. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. Let's see who else has just joined as well. Hello. Matt, how's it going? All right, so Ecamm Live. Let's go into live demo mode. Let's just switch that over to here. Okay, so here is the Ecamm overview, and your Ecamm setup may be very different to mine. I've just minimized some of the windows that I normally have open, but I'm going to go through a few things with you today. The first thing I typically do though, when I start up my Ecamm Live, if it's a brand new installation, is I'll go through some of the preferences and disable a few things. So let's do that first. The preferences you can access by hitting the Command comma button, and you'll see that the keystrokes are going to pop up here on the screen. So hopefully that'll help you. I'll zoom into any places as well that may need some clarification on the screen. So the couple of things that I disable first is this, let me just zoom in there for you, is the Show Camera Switcher in Main Window. This is the main window here, and typically there's a little camera switcher that pops up at the bottom. I do find that distracting sometimes, so I just disable it from the main window, and I'll show you how to get to the camera switcher when we get to that section later. Also, this Show Program window whilst other apps are running. So that's typically used when you go into something called preview mode, which is where you may want to change out some of your scenes and things while still maintaining the current scene that you're on. And that will bring up an Ecamm program window to show you what actually is visible to your audience. It's really useful if you want to make changes behind the scenes without your audience seeing what's going on. But I typically turn that off. One of the other things I disable if I go into video here is my default source mode. Now this does catch a few people out from time to time. By default, it is set to camera, which means every time you create a new scene, which I'll show you in a second, then your default first camera that Ecamm knows about would pop up. And sometimes that gets a bit confusing for people because then they can't add any overlays or any graphics and things like that. So I just typically set it to blank, where I'm starting with a completely blank canvas when I'm building my scenes up and stuff like that. So that's what I typically do. And those are just of a few things that I do change in my preferences when I start up my brand new Ecamm installation, or when I'm telling people who have used Ecamm for the first time what to change. Everything else I just leave at default for now. We'll go on to a few of the settings in a moment anyway. So let me just go back to the main screen. Let me just get out of live demo mode. So first off, I just wanted to talk to you about scenes and overlays. And these are the two things that you're going to be playing with the most when you do get into Ecamm Live. So think of scenes as pages or slides in a presentation, or even scenes in a movie. And these scenes can contain multiple things like cameras, as you see now, overlays like comments, text, backgrounds, screen shares, all that kind of good stuff. And we'll be going through how to set up a few of those things in a minute. And then the overlays are the components that actually go into those scenes. So overlays are your text, your video, your screen shares, and things like that. So if I go back to live demo mode, you'll see here that these are the two windows you're going to be living in the most when you do play with Ecamm Live. So the first one is the scenes window here. And at the moment, I've just got my countdown, which you've just seen, the host view, which is what I've got right now, and then an end scene when we finish the program today. And then down at the bottom is the overlays, and overlays are the things that we're going to be putting into the scenes, and we'll go through a few of those in a minute. So let's build our first scene. We're not going to go into too much graphical detail of how everything is set up, but I'm going to show you a few basic components to get you set up with a couple of scenes. And I'm just going to build out something like you would typically have on a show. And everybody's live stream, recorded podcast, whatever it might be that you're doing with Ecamm Live is very different. So you can create tons of scenes, multiple overlays in them, and so on. I'm just going to create a few basic scenes for you today to show how you can build those up, and then show you some little tips and tricks and things on how to get those set up correctly. So let's start by building our first scene. And down here at the bottom, in your scenes menu, in your panel, you'll see plus, duplicate scene, a new group, a automatic group, and we'll go through some of those in a minute. But what I want to do first, to create a brand new scene in Ecamm, I'm going to hit the plus button. Before I do that, if you don't see any of these panels, because there are a lot of panels within Ecamm, if you just go up to the Windows menu here at the top, you can see that we've got a ton of things that you can add as panels. We've got interview mode, your main window, program scenes, and so on. When we're referring to the main window, this is the actual main window. It's your canvas. So anything that you build within Ecamm is going to be visible here. And whatever is visible in this window is going to be visible to your audience, bar the overlays. Now, I'm in live demo mode at the moment, which means that you can obviously see everything that I'm seeing. But these little overlays that you see here, these controls showing that live and so on, won't be visible to the audience. And you can actually make those go away when you're building your scenes as well by hitting the Command tilde button, which just removes these overlays from the main window. So now, when you're building out your scenes, it's completely empty. There's nothing to distract you, and you can crack on and build your scenes accordingly. So let's build our first scene. Let's hit the plus button down here at the bottom. I'll disappear for a second. That's because, if you remember, I'd set my preference to blank when I'm creating a scene. So let's just do a new host. We'll call it new host. Okay. And then down here at the bottom is where I'm going to add the components to my scene. So I'm going to pick the one here at the bottom, which is my camera. So if I click on this, it'll bring up whatever default camera I've got set up. There's a few cameras I've got in here, which I'll show you in a second. And I'm going to pick camera A as my camera source. And you might be thinking, well, why am I picking camera A? What's that got to do with anything? That doesn't relate to the cameras that I have. Now, I'll show you a handy feature, which is something called the camera switcher. And the camera switcher is going to be your friend when you start to build out your scenes in Ecamm, especially if you have multiple cameras and things like that. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's bring on the camera switcher. So if we go to Window at the top, we'll bring on the camera switcher here. And as you can see, in the camera switcher, we have two tabs, All Sources and A and B. Let's look at All Sources first. What that means is that any camera that is connected to your Mac system and is being recognized by your Mac will be visible as camera sources in Ecamm. If you don't actually see the one that you're expecting, you can hit the plus button down here and actually add a camera placeholder. So there's a ton of cameras that are listed in my setup. These can be virtual cameras, cameras from other programs and things like that. In my setup, I've actually got 4 cameras running just for illustration. We've got the main camera that you're looking at now, one of the cameras that's on a slider here, the overhead camera, and then one of the OBSBot tail cameras. But any camera that is connected to your Mac is going to be visible in here and you'll be able to see it. Now, the great thing about Ecamm is that they introduced some time back something called this A/B mapping. And all it simply means is that you can create mappings for your cameras. So, for example, many cameras that connect to your Mac are not persistent. And what I mean by that, if you have multiple cam links connecting to your camera, to your Mac, sorry, you may not be able to distinguish which is the main camera versus an overhead camera, for example. So you can actually map those cameras within your Ecamm setup so you can actually reference them later. Because if you've got multiple scenes that reference the same camera, and that camera changes when you start your Mac up because you're using a cam link or something like that, for example, you can just simply remap those cameras back to a letter, and therefore all the cameras then will change. I'll explain that a bit more in a second. So as you can see here, I've got my main camera, that's always going to be this camera, is camera A, my slider camera is camera B, my overhead camera is camera C, and my OBSBot camera is camera D. And that's why I selected in my camera source, in my overlays, camera A. So for example, if I built out tons of scenes now with camera A in it, and I say, well, actually, I don't want this camera view anymore. I've got a new camera and I've mapped it to something else. If I just come here, I can actually change the mapping of my camera to be the slider. So now, for example, all scenes that contain camera A's overlay is going to be mapped to my new camera. So it's a quick, easy and flawless way of being able to switch out your cameras easily without going through every single scene and changing your camera. So the camera switcher is your friend and it's great for mapping. So that's why I've selected camera A in this particular case. So let's build out a scene first of all, and we'll just put in maybe a name and a little sort of text overlay and something like that. I'm going to get rid of the camera switcher for now and make things a little bit easier. So if we want to add components to this camera, then we will add them from the overlays menu down here at the bottom. So there's many things that you can add. I'm first of all going to just add some simple text. I'm just going to put my name with a graphic, and we'll just add that for now. So I'm just going to add a new text overlay. Now, the text overlays will remember the last font that you've used and the last settings. So that's great. So if you're building out scenes that are similar with text overlays that look and feel the same, then they will always have the same text selected and so on. So that's great. So I'm going to just pick this particular font, which is my favorites font, and I'm just going to put in my name. Before I do add this, just to let you know from a Mac perspective, you can actually create a collection of your favorite fonts that you use all the time. You can actually give it a name as well, and it's just basically creating a font folder within your Mac, and then therefore you can add your favorite fonts to it. So I'll just do that real quick. I'll just add it here. So you can hit the plus button. We'll just call it Ecamm. Hit return. And then if I go to sort of my recently used fonts or favorite fonts, let's just pick up this Antonio font here, for example, and I can just drag that into Ecamm. Let's pick another one, pick that to Ecamm, Gorilla font into Ecamm, and maybe a couple of others as well, like that. Okay, so now if I go to Ecamm, for example, I'll see all my favorite fonts are there. I'm just going to select the font that I want, which is this Gorilla font. Click Add. And therefore I've got now a name placeholder. It's a little bit large. You can use your scroll wheel on your mouse to change the size of this. And I'm just going to put it here for now. you'll notice when I'm actually moving stuff around, there are guidelines that tell you basically where to snap the actual overlay for. And it's really good if you are wanting to space out things evenly in your production, snap them to a certain part. If I click and hold this and drag it here, you'll see that now this center line comes up. And that center line is telling me that this text box is perfectly in the center. I don't want it there for now. The square, blue square around the whole frame is called the safeguard. And this is typically where you want to place everything within that wireframe, just in case certain programs and applications may crop your image slightly. This is the safe zone where everything you know that you put in there will be shown if you do streaming and things like that. I'm just going to move mine over there a little bit. The little area around this text is just called a border, and you can edit anything within this text box like anything you'll see in Ecamm. You'll be very familiar with the pen tool and the X tool. The X tool is just going to get rid of that from this main scene, and the pen tool is your edit tool. So let's click on the edit tool. You can see now there are a number of different functions and features that you can change within this text field. So first of all, the background color is set to dark. If I click on the color, I can bring the opacity down here a little bit. So I'll just bring that down a little bit. You can see it's changing the opacity of that color. I'll just change it a little bit there. It doesn't have to be completely dark. The text margin is basically going to change the text margin around the text. And then I can add a little border. At the moment, I've got a white border around this text overlay, and I've added a corner radius. As you can see, it's just changed one side, and it changes the sides depending on what you click here. So as you can see, this shape is representative of the text shape itself. So if I click here, I can make it perfectly square, or I click on this side and I can bring it in a little bit. Very simple. You can also change the border width. So if I want a very thin border, I can do that, or I'll make a large border. I'll just keep it at 4 at the moment. And you might see that each of these are numbered, which means that you can reference the different sizes of the borders and things that you create within here as well. So that's my name. Now, obviously with Ecamm, as I mentioned, you can bring in graphics and text overlays and things. So I'm going to bring out a graphic in here. I'm just going to double click on my assets. It's always good practice as well if you are building out scenes for yourself or even for other people, to have some form of folder structure to keep all your assets in there, because these will become very useful for referencing later. And if you do move some of these assets, then Ecamm might not be able to understand or recognize where these assets have gone. If they're stored in a cloud drive, for example, it's best to keep them locally. It's best to keep them in a folder structure that you can always reference later. And I'll come back to sort of organization and things like that later. So let's go to images. And let's bring in one of these little funky lower thirds that I've got here. There's a couple of ways of bringing in assets to your Ecamm production as overlays. You can click them, bring them into the overlays tab here, panel, sorry, or drag them straight into the production. Let's drag them straight into the production. I'll show you in a second what those differences are. This is one of the caricatures I created for the Creative Amplifiers show. So I'm going to just zoom out there. Look at that uncanny likeness. Thank you, Midjourney. So I'm going to just zoom out there a little minute. I'm going to bring this graphic here to the side. I might make it a little bit bigger, something like that. You can also move the graphics around with your mouse. I'm going to move my graphic out here a bit, move this one here, and so on. Just a little bit further right there. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm only doing this as a demo for now, but you can get the idea. Now, Ecamm also uses or has the concept of layers. And what I mean by that is anything that's sitting on the top row in your overlays panel is going to appear on top within your actual setup. So if I was, for example, to move my camera, if I was to move this image underneath my text, then you can see that it would appear underneath the text graphic here. So it's just a layer system. Anything that appears on top in this view here is going to appear on top within the actual main window. There's also two other things I wanted to point out: show in current scene and show in all scenes. hopefully that's self-explanatory. What that means is anything that appears in the show in current scene is only going to be visible within this particular scene. If I go and switch now back to the original host view, you can see that I don't have anything listed in this current scene. I only have the camera and the placeholder for the chat, which I'll talk about in a second. So if I go back to the new host scene, you can see that show in current scene means that I've got these elements here, only specific to this scene. If I was to drag this lower third graphic into show in all scenes, then when I go back to this one, you'll see the graphic is still there. So this is great if you've got a consistent branding that you want to have all through your scenes, like a lower third, a little bug, logo, whatever it might be. If you move it to your show in all scenes, then it's going to basically just remain there. For this particular case, I'm going to go back to the new scene, I'm going to drag it out, put it back into show in current scene. Hopefully that makes sense. So I've got my name, I've got my placeholder, but maybe I now want to change my camera and make it look a little bit better. I can do the same things that I've just done with the text as I do with the camera. So if I go to the camera little gear icon, you'll see there's 3 icons here. Well, there's 4, but let's talk about these 3 first. Every overlay component within a scene all has the same little icons. First of all, this one is a lock, which means that you can't modify or do anything once this particular overlay is locked. Pretty useful for things that you don't want to move around, or if you delete them accidentally. And then the little gear menu is the one where we can bring up all the settings. The final one is the eye, and that is the show and hide feature. So if I click on the eye, my camera will disappear. Click on it again, it will bring it back. So again, these are great ways of bringing in and hiding and showing various graphics and overlay elements in your Ecamm production. You can actually have, as it mentions here, a little key combination. So you can have a hotkey that will turn this graphic on and off, or this camera on and off, for example. And you can also add these into your Stream Deck. So there's lots of ways of controlling how you can turn on and off elements within a particular scene. But first, I'm just going to change this camera overlay a little bit. I'm going to change it by adding a border. And then I'm just going to do the border color, and I'm just going to make it white, keep it simple, keep it square. I can change again the width and things like that, but I'm just going to keep it like that for now. I'm not going to change the corner radius. I'm just going to make it square. You can also make it opaque if you want. And a recent feature, I say recent, a few months ago now, that was released is perspective. So you can actually change the perspective of your camera or any of your graphics within Ecamm. You can even rotate them if you want, which I do find a bit strange if you're trying to rotate a camera, but there's lots of things that you can do, especially if you've got an overhead camera, you want to rotate it a different way. If you want to make the perspective for a scene where you have a guest side by side, there's lots of great ways of changing the look and feel of your elements within your Ecamm production. The blend modes, I'm not going to go into too much. You need to speak to Martin McKenna about that. But these blend modes are basically ways of how the graphics blend and mix with other graphics within them. I can show you how we add other graphics later. And then transition is, how do you want to bring the element into the scene? I won't do it with my camera, but I will do it with my lower third name in a minute. And then you can add shadows and things like that. All right, so let's change this up a little bit. I actually want the border to be the same color as my graphic. So if I go into the name and click on the gear menu and bring up the border color, if I click on that, let me just get this out of the way a second. I just need to bring this here so I can get to it. Actually, I'll just do it like this. That's fine. I just want to change the border color. So if I click on the border, I click on the eyedropper. I just want to maybe pick a color from the scene. I can do that. I'll just pick up this purple. So now you can see my border has changed into purple, or I can make it this blue color, whatever I want. I'll just leave it at that for now. I just wanted to show you that you can use the eyedropper feature to actually match your branding into your color scheme within Ecamm, for example. What if you wanted to move these around? If you just move them individually, you can see that they all move independently. But there is another feature in Ecamm where you can actually lock these up, so they will all be grouped together, and then you can move them around the screen. We do that by adding the overlay elements into something called a folder. And the folder is this one down here. So let's click on that. All right, let's add this to the lower third. Let's add that to there, like this. And we'll just call this lower third. And you'll see here that there's a little lock tool. It's a link overlay group. And all that means is it will just link these things together. So if we click on this, you'll see now that this element is all linked together. And it's great because we might want to duplicate this later, bring it into another scene and create a guest scene and things like that. So that's a very quick way of creating a scene with a lower third. Now let's just create a similar scene, but now we'll have it as a guest. We'll do that real quick. So I'm just going to add the plus button again, and I'll just call it host and guest. Like that. We're going to add two cameras this time, but let's just add one camera to start with. As you can see, it's remembered all the border settings. I'm going to change this now to camera A. I'm going to change this, but now I want to actually put a background in there. So in this particular scene, let's go back to my overlays. I'm going to go images. I'm going to bring a background. Let's pick a background. Let's pick that one. I'm going to click and drag this background into here. And as you can see, look at what happened. We've got the background on top of the camera, so we do need to switch those around. Let's bring the camera down. And therefore now we've got a camera on top of this background. I'm going to lock the background because I don't want to change it. What I do want to do is change the sort of aspect ratio and styling of this camera. Let's go into the pen tool. And you'll see here that the shape is the camera shape. There are a ton of different shapes here. Classic, square, circle, squircle. That's what a squircle looks like. Tall, which is your vertical aspect ratio. Or custom. And with custom, I can actually click, pinch, and drag around the actual area where I can actually get this to be sized how I want. So I'm going to click on this pen tool again. I'm just going to change the corner radius down to something a bit more manageable. Okay, going to put that here. And as you can see, it's now going to snap for me. That's sort of one of the sort of quadrants that I want. And I'm going to just drag and copy, should I say copy, this lower third from the previous scene. So I just do Control C to copy. Go back into my host and guest, paste that in there. Just going to drag that on top. I don't really like that color, so I'm just going to change this. I'm going to change that to full. I'm going to change this to white or snow. Change this to square. I'm going to leave it like that for now. Get rid of that. Okay, so my lower third is sitting on top of my camera. I'm going to change, I'm just going to bring that up a little bit like that. Doesn't really matter. It's just for this. In fact, let me just change this border around. Make it look a bit better. There you go. That'll do for now. So, for example, I've got all this set up here. I can actually put this camera into the lower thirds group, like so. And then this is all locked together now, so I can move this around. Now, if I want to create a guest in here, all I want to simply do is if I hit the Option key, I can Option and drag this around, and now I've got two of me. But obviously, if I want to set this up for a guest, I'm going to change a few things with the name and stuff. So if I just rename this to guest, so I know which one is which. And if I click on the eyedrop tool, I can see which one is which here very easily. Let's go back to the camera switcher for a second. Because one of the good things about the camera switcher is I want to potentially put a placeholder camera here as my guest. So I'm going to select this camera and I'm just going to call it guest 2 as my placeholder camera for here. I'll talk about camera effects in a second, in a minute. Nobody wants to see 2 of me, so let's get rid of me very quickly. I'm going to change the camera here. I'm going to put it to camera E, which is going to be my guest. There's nobody there at the moment, but I'll show you what I'm going to do in a second. I'm going to change this text here by clicking the pen tool. I'm just going to give it another name. Anybody who's seen these demos of me before know what's coming. So let's just bring that all the way to there, like that. I'm going to change this so it's square at the bottom so it looks better. I'll do the same for that. Square, make it look better. Now, the great thing about Ecamm is you don't have to bring in this other image and mess around with it. What we can do is we can actually replace the asset. So if we want to change this graphic of me, let's click on the pen tool and you can click on this replace asset. So it's going to keep the settings, the aspect ratio and everything. I'm going to hit replace. I'm going to find the one that I want, which is Martini lower third. Click OK. And you can see now this graphic has changed to be my cat. Basically, that's who that is. So this is Martini here as my guest. And the reason why this line is through the graphic is because the overlay is based on the guest camera. If I was to change that to me, that would go away and it would be fine. It's just because there's no guest at the moment. So let's just change that back to camera E. A good tip as well is if you have a guest that's coming on and say their internet breaks or something and they disappear, you might want to just have a placeholder image of them there. So you can drag an image into here as well. So we're going to do that. Let's bring up the demo stuff. Images. Let's bring Martini as a placeholder. Just going to pop that in there. That's a very big graphic. So let's use the zoom tool to zoom out, bring it over there, and then we can just manipulate it to get it fitting right. And as you can see, it's a bit big. But the good thing about Ecamm is we've got some cropping tools. So if you hit the Option key, let me just move this up a bit. If you hit the Option key, you'll see that the arrow has changed to this double arrow. And that means I can now just start to crop this image. I can crop it left and right and so on. I can bring it down. What I would typically do here is spend a bit more time finessing this, but what I want to do is just change the corner radius a little bit so it fits better. Switch that out. You get the idea. And then we can just drag it a little bit more like that, and then bring it down. You have to spend a little bit more time than I am doing to get these things to look right. But you get the idea. You can basically crop and change and do what you want just to make things look good. So now there's myself and my guest that may come in, Martini, to basically be part of this production. I'm just going to take a break from this for a second. Let's go out of live demo mode and quickly see if there are any questions. I don't see any questions at the moment, but I will say hello to a few people. Hello, George. Thank you for joining. Congratulations on your win the other day. Hi, Val. Thank you for joining as well. Who else do we have? Hey, Mark. Thank you for joining. Hey, Yolanda. We've got a few people here as well, so thank you for joining. Hi, Dan. And hi, Jeremy. All right, let's get back into the program. Let's go back to live demo mode. If you do have a question, please put Q in front. As Paul has said, I'll try and answer the best I can. So let's go back to this host and guest view. When you have guests or any cameras coming in, you might not want them to be specifically, or they might not be in the right place. They may be too zoomed out. They may be cropped, whatever it might be. So each camera has the ability to have camera effects applied. And the camera effects are great because you can change lots of things in them. So let's just go to the camera effects window. And if you go to window, camera effects, you'll see here, if I just change this to camera A, right. So you see on camera A that this camera is configured like this. I'll make sure my camera A is here as well. Great. Okay. So each camera has the ability to have camera effects applied. And these camera effects can be applied system-wide, meaning that you can apply the camera effects to every scene your camera appears, or just make changes to a particular scene for that particular camera. And I'll show you what I mean. So I've got my camera A here, which is this camera in this particular scene. If I wanted to zoom myself in a bit more, you can do the zoom and pan. Crazy. And you can also pan me around. So if I'm just clicking on the image here, might be a bit small for you to see, but all I'm doing is I'm just clicking on this image like that. And don't worry if you see in my camera that my camera is quite faded out. It's because I'm using a particular profile on my camera and I'm just bringing in a LUT, which is a lookup table that changes the color of the camera. Nothing for you to worry about now. It's just wanted to let you know that's why it looks like that. You can also change the brightness, the temperature. Give myself a bit of an orange tan there. We don't want that. You can change the tint, saturation, gamma, all kinds of things within here as well, as you can see. So you can really dial in the look and feel of your production. And particularly if you're trying to match two people, if they're in a guest environment, it's always nice to have them positioned in the right place so the headspace is similar. You don't want somebody that's crazy zoomed out in one image and somebody is like way forward in another. It's just a little bit distracting and so on. So let's just zoom in here and make me look okay. Now, if you were happy with that image, not all of us are, but if you're happy with that image and you actually wanted to apply the aspect ratio, the zoom and pan, the colors that you've changed, the look that you've added, you can apply this look to every scene. And you do that by going down here and saying apply to all scenes. When you click that, I'm not going to do it now, but when you do, then every scene that has camera A in it, and if you remember from the beginning, we did the mapping of the cameras, which makes things a lot easier. So if you do want to make a change globally to all the settings in your cameras, do it like this and apply to all scenes, which makes things so much easier to do. So I'm going to leave it for here, but if you can see, I'm going to just ridiculously zoom in for a second. But if I go back to host, I'm not zoomed in because I haven't applied it to all scenes. Bingo. Makes things so much easier. So I'm just going to zoom out a second. Martini is maintaining herself to be very, very elegant there with her gangster glasses on. No cats were harmed, by the way, in the making of this production. Just to let you know. All right. So there you go. So that's how you would put a scene and build these out ready for you and a guest. And then obviously when your guest comes in, if we have time, I'll talk about interview versus Zoom and things, but that might be a bit too advanced for now. But depending on which method you want to bring a guest into your Ecamm production, you can use interview mode or the new Ecamm Zoom. You would simply then go into your camera switcher and then you can add them here. So when the name pops up into your AB source, you just add them to the camera placeholder that you've got here. In my case, it's E. And if you remember, I could just change this now to the OBSBot. Let me just make sure that she's, if I got the camera enabled. Oh yeah, because I put her right on the top, of course. So I need to remove her here. Always remove your placeholder because it's layered, right? Just testing you all there. Because it's layered and she's on top, then you wouldn't see me making any changes here to the bottom. So you know I can just switch in any camera that I want. And when your guest comes in, you can add the guest there. But I'm just going to put lovely Martini back there as well. So remember, layers catches you out, as it just did me then. All right, so we have two scenes now. We have the host, chatter, 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 welcome to this, blah, blah, blah. Now, what if you wanted to apply a little bit of flair to your text and graphic? You can bring these graphics in, make them fly in from the top, fly in from the bottom, and that's that transition mode I showed you earlier. And you have to apply the transition mode to each individual component overlay within your group. So what I mean by that is, if you can see here, we've got this lower third group, and within the group is contained this graphic and me. So the name. So I'm going to bring them both in using the same transition. Transition here is set to none. Excuse me, it's a bit fast. I'm going to change that and fly in from the left. And I'm going to do the same for the graphic. Transition, fly in from the left. So when I switch scenes now, I'll go to this one. If I go back to this, you'll see that that lower third just slowly zooms in, or pans in, should I say, from left to right. And if I hide it and open it back, therefore it just looks really seamless. And it's just a pretty cool way of sort of transitioning and things like that. Yeah, and Paul has made a great comment. By putting the placeholder under the camera any time there is disruption with the camera, the placeholder will automatically show. Yes, indeed. So let's just do that. Put it right under there, and you can see, blah, 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 lose the camera, and she's there. Right. Anyway, so that's how we create some easy transitions in bringing in elements. That can apply to camera sources. It can apply to anything. The great thing about Ecamm is, as you can see here, we've got the transition for the camera as well. So actually, I could fly this in from the bottom if I really wanted to, just for illustration purposes. I'll switch scenes, and therefore the camera pops in from the bottom. Slightly distracting. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm just going to say none for now. All right. So let's look on my list of other things to do. So we've got shapes as well that we can add to our scenes. Let's just create a new scene real quickly. Let's do shapes. If we didn't want to have a background, for example, if we don't have a background, let's just bring in a camera. Let's call it camera A. Let's make it a circle. Where's circle gone? I can't see it. There it is. Zoom that down. Say we want to just do our own background, and you can do that. Ecamm's got many different ways of bringing in nice backgrounds. I'm just going to bring in something very simple. So I'm just going to bring in a overlay here, and this is a shape. I'm going to click on it. The last shape that I brought in was a blur, so you can see it's here. I'm going to hit the pen tool. It's a rectangle, so I'm going to make it a gradient fill. I'm going to take off all of these elements here, and I'm going to give it a color, purple, fading into a different color. And you can see it's fading from well, top to bottom. That's where the gradient is. This little dial here will change the format of that gradient. So we'll just pop it there, and then we'll zoom out. And as you can see in the layers, I'm going to bring my camera on top, pop it there like that. I'm going to basically lock both of these. In fact, I just want to move the camera down here a second. All right. I'm going to call this presentation. With Ecamm, you can bring in, as I've mentioned, many different types of overlays. And one of the overlays I'm going to show you how to bring in now is something called a web widget. We'll go through a few. We've got web widget, we've got a screen share overlay, and yeah, that'll do for now. Let's do the web widget first. So the web widget is basically what it says. If you have a web site that you want to bring in, you don't have to now share the entire Chrome window, for example. You could just bring in one of your favorite videos. So I'm just going to go into my Ecamm links. I'm going to go to the Ecamm community page. This is a URL I grabbed earlier. And I'm going to bring in a web widget, and that is done by this little web globe here. We'll click on plus. It remembers the last web widget I did, which was Social Stream Ninja, which is an overlay. I'm going to give the web widget an overlay. I'm just going to call it Ecamm Community. And I'm going to paste in the URL here. Now, you can give it any size that you want. I'm just going to leave it at 1280 by 720 for now. I'm going to click on high resolution mode. So if there's graphics and animations and things like that, it looks nice. I'm going to keep it running. And I don't want to fill the entire frame because I want to resize the frame. And that's the beauty. You can resize this frame now. So let's add this widget overlay. And it will pop in. And because it's a widget or an overlay, I can move it around. I can resize it, which I'm going to do. I'm going to just pop it there for now. And I'm going to bring me on top of that. So I'm just going to bring myself there. Okay. There's a couple of things you'll notice in terms of the web widget. There's a little toggle switch. When you toggle to the left, you can move the overlay around as you would do with any graphic, any overlay, or anything like that. So we're just going to leave it there. when I toggle it to the right, oops, where's it gone? There you go. I'm going to toggle this to the right. You can see it's moved over to the right. It now becomes an interactive web page. So now I can treat this like a browser within a browser, and I can basically click on links and say, if you want to learn more about Ecamm, you can sign up here. I can even type if I wanted to. I can type in my name. I can navigate through this website as if it was running in Chrome, which is super useful because then I don't have to have multiple Chrome windows open and doing all that good stuff. It's not a fully fledged Chrome browser. What I mean by that is it doesn't keep passwords or persistent cookies and things like that. So if you have got a page that you're trying to show that you need to log into, then when you switch between scenes, you may have to re-log in and enter your credentials, which is fine. It's a safety thing more than anything, which I like. But as you can see, I can navigate through here. I can click on products, click on anything that I want. It'll take me to the Ecamm page. And actually navigation as well. So the back and forward arrows, if I want to go back to where I've just come from, I just click on back, and it's a really easy way of navigating and adding a web widget to the scene. So instead of having Chrome, I always prefer using the web widget. All right, let's just hide this one a second, and let's add something else. So Ecamm allows you to add, as I said, graphics and videos and all kinds of things. But there's a caveat with that. There's a couple of things you need to be aware of when you're adding videos, and this is something that does catch people out. So if I just create a new scene, for example, I'll just call it video. There's a couple of ways. If you want to add videos to your production, then you can do it in two ways. The first one is if you have got a full video, and I've got here a copy of the YouTube video that Doc and Katie did on the new show Microphones with Laura, I can just click and drag this into my main window. And this is what happens when I do that. You can hear that the music's playing, and if I bring up the controls on my main window, you can see here that I could actually scrub through this video as a normal video. I can go forward 30 seconds and so on. And then I've got options here to say, well, what do you want to do when you switch to that scene? Do you want to start this video from the beginning? Do you want to start it from the last position? So let's say start it from the last position.
Let's
play away.
Source.
Let's go away and do host and guest, and then go back to video.
Is on.
And you can see it's playing from where it was left. Now that's fine, but you can't do anything with this. You can't resize it. You can't crop it. You can't put a border around it. You can't do, well, actually you can put a border around it if you really wanted to, but you can't actually do anything with it in terms of sizing and so on. And the reason for that is it's a video, and videos are treated as a full screen element. So if you want to have a video in your production with sound that you want to change the size of, or even perspective and do things like that, then I'd recommend you create something called a WebM. And the WebM is a file that you can actually, Doc is in the chat. Why is my unlicensed face in the screen? My legal team will be in contact. Doc, that's fine. You just send it to marketing@ecamm.com and they'll be able to sort it out for you. Perfect. All right. So as you can see, you might not want to, you want to avoid maybe copyright issues as well with the videos in your production. So always check with the copyright owner first before you want to show some of your stuff. Anyway, if you want to bring in a video with sound into your Ecamm production, then you should convert the video into a WebM format, particularly if you want to have it with sound. You can drag a video into your Ecamm production and move it around if you don't want to have sound. So let me show you how to do that. Let's click a new scene. Let's do video again, video 2. And I'm going to drag this video, but instead of dragging it into the main window, I'm going to bring it into the overlays panel. And watch what happens when I do that. It's going to prompt me and ask me, what do I want to do? Do I want to add this as an animated overlay? And when I do that, that would mean this video plays without sound, or do I want a full screen video with audio? If it's with audio, then you're going to see the same thing as before, whereby the video plays full screen with sound. If I add it as an animated overlay, you can see now that I can manipulate it, I can do things with it, I can change the corner radius, add a border, whatever I want, but there's no sound playing. So if you want to have this playing with sound, then I recommend you use an application called Shutter Encoder. It's free and it's from a great developer. He's always updating this program. You can just do a Google search for it. I think Paul may even have a link that he'll put in the chat later for you. Shutter Encoder is a program that allows you to convert videos, audio files, anything you can throw at it basically into a different type of format. So it converts it from one format to another. So if you do have a MP4 video file that you want to convert, then use Shutter Encoder and you'll end up with something called a WebM file. And a WebM file is a video file basically that plays with sound. So if we do video 2, and Paul has already added that to the chat. Thank you so much, Paul. If I now grab this WebM file down here, as you can see, and drag this into the main window.
Kids.
I was born
There is
ready.
Doc.
I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about all the mic stuff.
And I've only
I feel
got a section here. And now you can see that it's playing with sound. I can put it wherever I want. I could drag add another camera in there as well, just like before. There you go. So now I can talk and say, hey, have you seen this great Flow podcast from Katie and Doc? And, Doc accepts Bitcoin and so on for the royalties for these particular types of videos. And you can play this video, as you can see here.
a little bit inadequate today, though, because I only have one mic.
And you can also then change various things. So once the video is finished, you can say, well, you can hide the video, you can hide it, stay hidden. You can loop the video around so you can keep it playing. You can start from the last location and have it autoplay when you switch to a particular scene. And Paul has kindly put a link in the chat there to an explanation video on how to use Shutter Encoder in more detail. And Doc's explanation is great. I encourage you to go and watch that video if you're new to Shutter Encoder. It's a great program. Go and check it out. So those are sort of two ways of bringing in videos into
I was born ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about all the mic stuff.
Okay. So that's a WebM file. That's a video file. Let's see what else I've got on my list. Okay, so you'll notice that I'm able here to bring in comments, as I've just mentioned. So we can bring in comments from the chat into your production. And if you want to style and have the look and feel of your comments set to a particular way, in line with your branding, the colors, the fonts that you use, you can create a comments placement overlay into your production. And I'll show you how to do that, whereby then you can change the styling and do whatever you want. So let's go into overlays at the top here, and you can add a placeholder comment overlay. Let's add that. And you can see here that this is showing me my last settings of my comment overlay. Now this is going to disappear because I've got my preferences set to 15 seconds. So I'm going to change my Ecamm preferences a second for this. Go into preferences, go into general, and down here it says automatically hide comments after 15 seconds. I'm going to uncheck that for a minute. I'm going to unhide the comment overlay and just change this real quick. Let's click on that. Edit text. Going to change this font to Antonio. I'm going to change the color, just something ridiculous like that. Save it. And I'm going to hide that now. And then hopefully when I bring in a comment from Doc, you can see now that it's changed the color based on the setting that I've just done. So again, it's a great way of adding comments to your production and then styling it in exactly the way that you want. I'm just going to put my preferences back. So let's hit Command, comma, bring up preferences, automatically hide after 15 seconds, and there you have it. Okay, so what else do we want to bring in here as well? We've got some images. Music, you can bring in music to your Ecamm production in a very similar way that you can drag and drop any type of text element. I'm not going to bother with this now. It is royalty free, but just in case, you can just drag the music in there. And once you do drag the music in, you will get a little gear menu at the top here to set up the level for the particular volume for that track. And you can have multiple different audio tracks in each scene, or you can have the same audio track going through each scene. And all you do is you tell the audio file. In fact, I can play because I know it's royalty free. Let's just drag it in. I'll just pause. So you can see here, I've got the audio file and it comes up with this little gear menu, and you've got a couple of options. You can change the volume of it, which is great. So you can change the volume of that. And this is persistent on particular scenes. So what I mean by that is if you add this audio file to another scene, you can also change the volume. So it can be louder, for example, on a Be Right Back screen. And then when you add it to your normal scene, you can change the volume to make it lower, that it sits under your voice. You can also get the audio file to stop when you switch scenes. But if you uncheck that, it has a very nice fade out between the scenes as well, something that Ecamm has added. So it's a great little way of adding music to your production. I do it all the time. I have about 1 hour MP3 lo-fi chill out tunes that run in my production, and I've got them added to various scenes. So when I do my Be Right Back scene, it's on full volume, and then when I'm talking, it's at a lower volume and things like that. So it's a really good way of adding a little bit more production value to your live streams or recorded content. Let me just check here if there are any questions. No, let's see what else I've got here. Web widgets, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Ecamm also has the ability, I'll just get rid of those. That's it. Ecamm also has the ability to record your production, and that's set up in your preferences. You've got the ability to record 3 cameras as isolated video and also isolated audio tracks. So fantastic for repurposing your content, such as podcasts and things like that. I'll show you where that is real quick. Go to preferences. And if you go into recording, you can see here that you've got some options. You can record all broadcasts, which I typically do. And then you've got the option to record isolated video tracks. At the moment, you've got up to 3 because of the limitations of the Mac hardware and so on, especially if you're recording in 4K. It's quite intensive from a processor perspective. When you click on any of these cameras, you can choose which particular microphone or audio source you want for the cameras, which is great. You can have up to 3, as I said. Another great feature is that you can apply camera effects to the recorded videos. So for example, as you saw where I was changing the color temperature, the brightness, and all those effects within the camera settings, you can have those added to the isolated recorded video files. Or if you don't want to and do all that in post-production, you can just basically uncheck this as well. One thing that I always like to have enabled, particularly when I am recording, is record only prompts for file names. So this means when you stop recording, Ecamm's going to prompt you and say, do you want to add a particular name for this file that you've just recorded? I always have it set to when recording ends. It's a great feature because then you can rename your files. I do a lot of tutorial videos, so as I'm going through different takes or different workflows, it just helps me find those files later and make them a little bit more easy to find within my production. You'll notice at the beginning of this session we had a countdown timer, and I'll show you some of the features of that. So adding a countdown timer is simple. Click on this little countdown timer box here, and if you remember what I was talking about before, the settings for your text and graphics are all persistent, and it remembers it from the last time that you added one. The same applies to your countdown timer. So I'm going to change this to a different font. I'm going to change the text color to something ridiculous. So this is orange. Now you've got a couple of things with the countdown timer. You can count down for a certain amount of time, count down to a time of every day, time of date. You can have a clock or a stopwatch. I typically use these countdown timers for various things. One, obviously for starting a live stream. And then once the countdown timer has reached 0, you can have it go to the next scene when finished. Also, I use this to go to a next scene automatically if I want to, by having a hidden countdown timer in my system. So I have a countdown timer like this. Say there's a video playing. I don't want to switch the video myself using Stream Deck on my pedal. I can hide this countdown timer by making the opacity 0. And therefore, when it reaches 0 and the countdown, it will switch to the next scene automatically. So great if you want to automate some of your scenes and your workflows within your Ecamm production. And speaking of automation, I just wanted to show you one last thing, because I know we're at the top of the hour already. Time flies when you're having fun. I wanted to show you one last thing in the scenes, which is called automatic group. And this is really useful if you want to automatically switch scenes without you having to do anything at all. Similar to what I mentioned with the countdown timer, but this is a much easier way of doing it. Let's create a new automatic group real quick. And we'll just pop it here and we'll just call it cameras. If I wanted to switch between, let's say, 2 or 3 different cameras, then I can do that easily by creating multiple scenes with the different cameras in. In this particular case, I'm just going to switch the scenes that I've already created automatically. Let's go with the host and guest one first. So I'm just going to click this and drag that into this folder. It's just like a normal folder, which is that one. And then let's just do a new host, which is that one. And therefore, as you can see now, these 2 scenes are contained within this auto folder. And this auto folder is different from a standard folder because it has a couple of options. If I click on this gear menu here, it's got a couple of things. Do I want it to advance to next scene? Yes. Or I'll do a random scene. There's only 2, so I'll do next scene. Do I want it to advance at a fixed time interval? I'll say random. And I'll say between 5 seconds and let's say 8. And then the transition is I'll just do a cross dissolve between the 2. If I hit play now on this, it's going to randomly switch between the scenes that I've put in there. So I've got host and guest, as you can see. I'll make it full screen. And then I'll just wait and it'll randomly switch. So if you've got, for example, multiple scenes and you've got a different camera per scene, this is a really nice, easy way of actually switching cameras in scenes without me doing anything. Look, no hands. I'm not even using the pedals. I'm not going to stand up and show you that I'm not using the pedals, but you get the idea. So that's another great way of being able to sort of use the power of Ecamm to switch scenes automatically. There are tons of features within Ecamm, so many that I'd like to go through, but I'm obviously at the top of the hour today. I will just check if there are any questions and so on. Nobby, thank you so much. Getting up at 4 a.m. to watch me. It's an honor. Thank you so much. I hope you've learned something from today's session. I will just wait a few minutes to see if there are any other questions. In the meantime, for those of you that are going to Creator Camp, I will be there in a few weeks as well as part of the Creative Amplifiers CCTV team. I can't wait to see you all, see your faces, learn from each other, meet each other, and so on. It's going to be a great event. And yeah, it's been a privilege to be on the show today, and you'll see me again, I guess, sometime soon. And let me just check if there's any other questions. There is not. All right, if there's nothing else, if nobody's got any other questions, I'll just give you 5 seconds. And if there's no questions coming in, thanks, Paul. Yeah, there's some fundamentals series as well that I do on the Ecamm channel. So thank you so much, Paul, for that. And yeah, thank you so much, Val. It's really appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. And can't wait to see you at Creator Camp. And until next time, see you soon. Take it easy.